The first thing I heard after the crash was my wife thinking, if he dies, I can finally tell everyone the truth. I opened my eyes to shattered glass, the sharp smell of gasoline, and my wife's trembling hand pressed against my chest. Elias, stay awake. Her voice sounded terrified, but inside my head, another voice whispered clearly, please don't let him wake up. Please. I stared at her. She froze. For one strange second, neither of us moved. Then she squeezed my hand harder. I love you, she said, tears running down her face. Don't you dare leave me. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. Then the ambulance doors slammed shut. And for the first time in my 7-year marriage to the most famous woman in the country, I realized that the person holding my hand might not be saying what she was thinking. My name is Daniel Vale. And until that night, I had spent 7 years believing that being the man behind a celebrity meant being invisible. My wife, Celeste Arden, was an actress whose face appeared on Billboard from Los Angeles to Tokyo. She had won awards, built a cosmetics empire, and accumulated more followers than some countries had citizens. I had never minded standing behind her. When we met, she wasn't famous yet. She was 23, working in a small theater and eating instant noodles because she couldn't afford dinner after rehearsal. I was 25, repairing audio equipment for local studios. She once asked me, why do you keep helping me? I laughed. Because you're terrible at taking care of yourself. She smiled. Then promise you'll keep doing it. I did. That promise became our marriage. I helped her record auditions. I drove her to casting calls. I edited her early demo reels at 3 in the morning. When she finally landed her breakthrough role, I was the one sitting in the back of the theater while thousands of people applauded her. Afterward, she ran straight past reporters and hugged me. You were here. Of course. I knew you would be. I thought that was love. Maybe it was. But somewhere along the way, the woman I married became surrounded by people who needed something from her. Managers, producers, investors, friends who suddenly remembered her birthday. And one man in particular, Marcus Reed, her manager. He was charming, polished, and always close enough to whisper into her ear. At first, I trusted him. Then Celeste began coming home later. She stopped telling me about meetings. Whenever I asked, she smiled. It's work, Daniel. So I stopped asking. That was my first mistake. My second was believing silence meant peace. 3 months before the crash, Celeste told me something that hurt more than I admitted. I think you should move out of the house for a while. I stared at her. Why? Because the tabloids are saying our marriage is hurting my career. I almost laughed. After everything we built, she looked away. I need space. I wanted to fight. Instead, I nodded. Okay. She expected an argument. I could see it in her eyes. But I packed a suitcase. That night, I slept in a hotel. The next morning, she called. Come home. I returned without asking why. I always returned. Until the night of the crash. Until I heard what she was thinking. At the hospital, doctors said I had suffered a concussion but would recover. Celeste had a fractured collarbone and several cuts across her forehead. The media gathered outside within an hour. Cameras flashed through the windows. Reporters shouted her name. Her publicist arrived. Marcus arrived too. He hugged Celeste. You're alive. That's all that matters. His voice sounded warm. But inside his head, another sentence surfaced in mine. If Daniel remembers the conversation before the crash, we're finished. I went cold. I looked at Marcus. He stared back. For a moment, I wondered if I was hallucinating. Then Celeste looked at me, and I heard her again. He can't know about the contract. That was when I understood. The crash hadn't changed my mind. It had changed what I could hear. The doctors called it an unusual neurological side effect. I called it a nightmare. At first, I thought I could only hear Celeste and Marcus because they were emotionally close to me. Then a nurse walked past my bed. I hope this celebrity tip's better than the last one. I nearly sat up. Another doctor entered. His scans looked normal. Why does he keep staring at everyone? I stopped breathing. It wasn't their voices. It was their thoughts. And once I realized that, I couldn't turn it off. The hospital became unbearable. Every smile had another face behind it. Every polite sentence had a hidden meaning. Celeste's publicist told her, "We're going to protect your image." I heard, "If this marriage becomes a scandal, I'll lose 3 major clients." Marcus told Celeste, "Don't worry about Daniel. He'll understand." I heard, "He always forgives you. That's why this was so easy." I closed my eyes. My chest tightened. I remembered the first apartment Celeste and I rented. The tiny kitchen. The broken heater. The night she couldn't stop crying because she had failed another audition. I had held her until sunrise. "I don't need you to become famous," I told her. She whispered, "But I want to become someone worthy of you." I kissed her forehead. "You already are." Now, 7 years later, I lay in a hospital bed, listening to the people around her discuss how to remove me from her life. That evening, Celeste came into my room alone. She sat beside me. "Daniel." I looked at her. "Are you angry?" "No." She studied my face. "You've barely spoken." "I've been tired." She reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold. "I was so scared when the car crashed." I heard her thought, "Please believe me." I almost pulled away. Instead, I asked quietly, "Celeste, were you planning to divorce me?" Her expression changed, only for a second. Then she smiled sadly. "Why would you ask that?" "Because I need the truth." She looked toward the window. I was confused. That answer hurt more than yes. I heard what she didn't say. Marcus told me the divorce would make the company easier to control. My eyes moved toward her. Was Marcus involved? Her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" I said nothing. She squeezed my hand. "Daniel, please. Don't make this harder." There was not love, not fear, an inconvenience. I looked at the woman I had spent 7 years protecting and realized something painful. I had been fighting for a marriage that she had already abandoned. The next morning, Marcus brought documents in my room. "Just routine paperwork," he said. I didn't touch them. "What are they?" "Financial matters." I looked down. There was a separation agreement, and beneath it was a document transferring several shares from Celeste Production Company. My name appeared in the middle. I remembered what he had been thinking the night before. Once he signs, Celeste can finalize everything without worrying about his claim. I pushed the papers back. "I won't sign." Marcus smiled. "You don't understand how complicated this is." "I understand enough." His smile disappeared. Then Celeste entered. She looked at the documents. "Daniel." I waited. She didn't defend me. She didn't tell Marcus to leave. Instead, she whispered, "Maybe it's better this way." Something inside me finally became quiet. Not broken. Quiet. I nodded. "Okay." Celeste looked surprised. "Okay." "Yes." I pulled the blanket over my hands. "I won't fight you anymore." She stared at me as if those words were more frightening than an argument. And for the first time in 7 years, I didn't ask her to stay. I didn't ask her to explain. I didn't ask her to love me. I simply looked out the window and began thinking about where I would go when I left the hospital. Because I already knew one thing. Whatever life waited outside that building, I would build it without her. I left the hospital 3 days later with one suitcase, a fractured wrist, and no intention of returning to the mansion Celeste and I had shared. Celeste stood near the hospital entrance when I came outside. Cameras surrounded her. Her shoulder was still wrapped in a brace, but she looked perfect. She always did. A reporter shouted, "Celeste, are you and Daniel still together?" She turned toward me. For a moment, I thought she might answer honestly. Instead, she smiled. "We're taking some time to focus on recovery." The cameras exploded with questions. I kept walking. Behind me, I heard her thoughts. "He'll come back. He always does." I didn't turn around. My old apartment was gone. Celeste had sold it 2 years earlier because she wanted to invest in a property development project. So I rented a small studio above an old music shop on the edge of the city. The room had peeling paint, one window, and a radiator that made a strange knocking sound every night. It was perfect. No assistants. No security guards. No cameras. No people pretending to care. For the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts. At least I thought I could. The ability hadn't disappeared. I learned that quickly. The owner of the music shop, an elderly man named Arthur, gave me a key and said, "The upstairs room isn't much." I smiled. "It's more than enough." He looked at my injured wrist. "You work in music?" "I used to." "What do you do now?" I hesitated. "I don't know." Arthur nodded, as though that answer made perfect sense. "You'll figure it out." That sentence stayed with me. Because for 7 years, my entire identity had been built around Celeste. Her schedule, her career, her problems, her dreams. I had forgotten that I once had dreams of my own. When I was younger, I wanted to design sound systems for concert halls. Not glamorous ones. The kind nobody noticed. The kind that made a person sitting in the last row hear a singer as clearly as someone standing beside the stage. I had abandoned that dream when Celeste's career took off. I told myself I was choosing love. Maybe I was. But love shouldn't require you to disappear. 2 weeks passed. I stopped answering Celeste's calls. Not because I wanted to punish her. Because every conversation left me confused. She would say, "I miss you." And I would hear, "Why isn't he coming back?" She would say, "Can we talk?" And here, "I need to know what he remembers." She sent flowers. I returned them. She sent a handwritten letter. I left it unopened. Then one evening, someone knocked on my door. It was Marcus. He stood there in an expensive coat, looking irritated. "You've made this unnecessarily difficult." I leaned against the doorframe. "What do you want?" "You need to sign the separation agreement." "No. You don't understand what happens if you refuse." "I understand." He stepped closer. "Celeste's reputation is at stake." I almost smiled. "Her reputation has nothing to do with me." He lowered his voice. "You've benefited from her success." That sentence hurt. Not because it was true, because it was exactly what I had secretly feared everyone thought. For years, I had wondered whether people believed I was only useful because I was married to her. Now Marcus had said aloud. I looked at him. "You're right about one thing." He waited. "I did benefit from her success." His eyebrows lifted. "Finally, I benefited from loving someone I thought loved me." His smile vanished. I closed the door. That night, I sat at my small desk and opened an old box I had brought from storage. Inside was a notebook. My handwriting filled the first pages. Speaker designs, acoustic calculations, concert hall diagrams, ideas I had written when I was 22. At the bottom of one page, I had written, "Someday, I want to build something people remember hearing." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I picked up a pencil and started again. The first design failed. The second failed worse. The third produced a sound so distorted that Arthur came upstairs thinking something had exploded. "What happened?" I laughed. "I made a mistake." Arthur looked at the papers scattered across my floor. "Then make another." I looked at him. He shrugged. "That is how you learn." For the first time since the crash, I laughed without feeling guilty. I didn't know it yet, but that tiny room above the music shop was where my life was going to change. Not because I became famous. Not because Celeste regretted losing me, but because I finally remembered who I had been before everyone else told me who I was supposed to become. 3 months after the crash, I had built a crude prototype from discarded equipment. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't even reliable. But it did something I had never seen another compact system do. It separated overlapping frequencies in crowded environments and reproduced voices with remarkable clarity. I called it Clear Tone. Arthur became my unwilling test subject. "Again," he complained. "Just one more test." "You've said that 6 times. 7. He sighed. I played a recording. His expression changed. You can hear every instrument separately. That's the point. Who would buy this? I don't know. That was the problem. I knew how to build things. I didn't know how to sell them. So I began researching. Night after night, I studied patents, acoustic engineering, manufacturing costs, and licensing agreements. I discovered something painful. My design had potential, but I didn't have the money to develop it. I considered selling the prototype. Then I remembered something. Celeste had once told me, "You're always thinking about the next person who needs you. When will you think about yourself?" I used to laugh whenever she said it. Now I understood. I needed to bet on myself. I took a small loan. I rented a workspace. I found 2 young engineers willing to work for modest salaries because they believed in the technology. One of them was Maya Chun. She had sharp eyes, messy hair, and absolutely no patience for my habit of apologizing. "You say sorry too much," she told me during our first week. "I do. Yes." "For what?" "For existing." I laughed. She didn't. "I'm serious." Something about her honesty made me comfortable. Unlike the people around Celeste, Maya never cared about my surname. She didn't care that I had been married to a celebrity. She cared whether my equations worked. And when they didn't, she told me, "Your frequency model is wrong." How wrong? Embarrassingly wrong. Thank you. You're welcome. We worked for months. There were setbacks. A supplier disappeared with our deposit. A prototype overheated. One investor rejected us after a 12-minute presentation. Another laughed. "You're competing against companies with billions." I nodded. "I know. So why keep going?" I looked at the prototype. "Because they're solving a different problem." He shook his head. "Good luck." For a while, I thought he was right. Then Maya found a small accessibility technology conference. "Present there," she said. "I don't have a booth. Neither do half the people attending. I don't have marketing. You have a working prototype. That isn't enough." She looked at me. "It was enough to get you out of that hospital bed." I didn't answer. The conference changed everything. Not overnight, but enough. A professor from a major university tested clear tone. Then another engineer. Then a company specializing in hearing assistance technology. They weren't interested in celebrity endorsements. They weren't interested in my connection to Celeste. They were interested in the technology. 6 weeks later, a small company offered us a licensing agreement. I stared at the contract. The number at the bottom wasn't enormous, but it was mine. I called Arthur. Remember the speaker? The noisy one? We got the contract. There was silence. Then he said, "Good." I laughed. "You don't sound surprised. I've watched you work every day." He paused. "You were always going to get there." That night, I went back to my apartment and opened the last drawer of my desk. Inside was a photograph of Celeste and me from our first year together. We were standing outside that tiny theater where she had once performed. She was laughing. I was looking at her instead of the camera. I held the picture for a while. Then I put it away. Not because I hated her, because I didn't need to keep proving that the past had been real. Meanwhile, across the city, Celeste's career was beginning to wobble. Her latest film had underperformed. Rumors about her separation were growing. And Marcus had begun making decisions without telling her. I knew none of this. But one afternoon, while reviewing a new contract, I heard a thought from someone standing beside me. "That's Daniel Vale." I looked up. The man was staring at my name on the conference badge. The husband who disappeared. I felt a strange chill. For the first time, the world was beginning to remember me for something other than being Celeste Arden's husband. And somewhere far away, Celeste was about to learn that I hadn't disappeared. I had simply stopped waiting for her to notice me. The first time Celeste saw my name again, it wasn't on a divorce document. It was on the front page of a business magazine. Local engineers, accessibility device attracts international interest. My photograph sat beneath the headline. I was standing beside the clear-tone prototype, wearing a plain gray shirt. No designer suit. No celebrity beside me. Just my name. Daniel Vale. Celeste stared at the page for several seconds. Marcus was sitting across from her in the office. "So," he asked. She didn't answer. Her fingers tightened around the magazine. I heard her thought from across the room. He did this without me. Marcus glanced at the article. "You should congratulate him." Celeste looked at him. "Do you think he's trying to embarrass me?" "No." Marcus paused. "He's doing something worse." "What?" "He's becoming irrelevant to your story." Celeste's expression changed. That sentence frightened her more than I think Marcus intended. For years, everyone had introduced me as Celeste Arden's husband. Now reporters were introducing Celeste as the actress who had once been married to an engineer developing revolutionary audio technology. The difference was subtle, but it was growing, and Celeste noticed. She called me that evening. I stared at her name on my phone. For a long time, I didn't answer. Then I did. "Hello." There was silence. "Daniel?" "Yes." "You're doing well." "I'm trying." I saw the article. "I know." She laughed softly. "You sound different." I didn't know what to say. Then I heard her thought. "Tell me you still need me." I closed my eyes. She whispered, "I'm proud of you." That time, I believed the words. Maybe because there was no calculation behind them. Maybe because she had finally realized that I was no longer standing in her shadow. "Thank you," I said. "Can I see you?" I looked at the prototype on my desk. "Why?" "I just want to talk." I could have refused. Instead, I agreed. We met at a quiet restaurant where she wore a hat and sunglasses to avoid attention. When she removed them, I barely recognized her. Not because she looked different, because I was seeing her without the old version of myself. The woman across from me wasn't the person I had spent years trying to save. She was simply Celeste, a woman who had hurt me, a woman I had loved. Both things could be true. "You've changed," she said. "So have you." She smiled sadly. "I miss you." I heard the thought underneath. I miss knowing he would always be there. I didn't react. She looked down. "Are you happy?" The question surprised me. I thought about Arthur, Maya, the engineers, the workshop, the failed prototypes, the little victories. "Yes." She swallowed. "I didn't think you'd move on this quickly." "I didn't move on quickly." She looked up. "I spent 7 years moving toward you." I paused. Moving away took one night. Her eyes filled with tears. For the first time, I saw no anger in her. Only pain. But pain wasn't enough to rebuild trust. She reached across the table. I didn't take her hand. "I made mistakes," she said. "You did. Can you forgive me?" I thought about the hospital, the contract, Marcus, the crash, the voices. "I already have." Her eyes widened. "Then why won't you come home?" "Because forgiveness isn't the same as returning." She looked down. Neither of us spoke. Then her phone vibrated. She glanced at it. "Marcus." She ignored the call. A minute later, it rang again. She answered. "What?" His voice was tense. "What do you mean the company accounts are frozen?" Celeste's face went pale. I heard Marcus thinking through the phone. "If she finds the shell company, I'm finished." I looked at Celeste. She noticed my expression. "What?" "Nothing." But I knew. Something was wrong. Very wrong. When we left the restaurant, Celeste stopped me outside. "Daniel, I need to ask you something." I turned. "Did Marcus ever talk to you about transferring my company's shares?" I stared at her. "Yes." She went still. "What did he say?" "That it was routine." "And you didn't sign?" "No." She exhaled shakily. "Thank God." I heard her thought. How much did he take? I realized then that Celeste didn't know the full truth either. Marcus hadn't just been manipulating me. He had been manipulating her. And if that was true, the crash might not have been an accident after all. The police eventually reopened the crash investigation after a mechanic found something strange in the vehicle. One of the brake lines had been damaged before impact. Not broken by the collision. Tampered with. Celeste called me immediately. "I need you to come." I went. Not for her. For the truth. The investigator showed us photographs. There was no evidence of a manufacturing defect, he said. Someone interfered with the system. Celeste covered her mouth. "Boo, we don't know yet." I looked at her. She was shaking. Then I heard her thought. Marcus knew the car was being serviced that day. I stared at her. She noticed. "What? Did Marcus arrange the service?" "Yes." "Who else knew?" She looked toward the investigator. "I don't know." But her thoughts were louder than her words. There was one other person. Celeste. She looked at me. "Who else?" Her face went white. "My financial director." The investigation widened. Bank records were reviewed. Company accounts were examined. Several payments led to a consulting company that technically didn't exist. The shell company was receiving money from Celeste's production business. Million. The more investigators dug, the worse it became. Marcus had been diverting money for nearly 2 years. But there was another discovery. He had also been using Celeste's signature on documents she had never seen, including the separation agreement. The document he had brought to my hospital room wasn't simply designed to remove my claim. It was designed to transfer control of several company assets. My refusal had stopped the transaction. Suddenly, everything made sense. The strange pressure, the secrecy, the urgency, the crash. Marcus wasn't trying to destroy me because he hated me. He needed me out of the way. I had access to old financial records because I had once helped Celeste manage her production company. If I had signed, Marcus could have completed the transfer. And if I had died in the crash, nobody would have questioned why my signature was missing. Celeste sat across from me in the investigator's office. I almost lost everything. I nodded. She whispered, "Because of me." I didn't answer. She looked at me. "You were trying to protect me all along." I remembered the years when she had accused me of being controlling. The times I had asked about contracts. The moments I had warned her about people surrounding her. She had thought I didn't trust her. The truth was simpler. I trusted her. I didn't trust everyone else. And eventually, she stopped trusting me. Marcus was arrested weeks later after investigators found evidence connecting him to the fraudulent accounts. The crash investigation continued. The person who tampered with the vehicle was eventually identified as a contractor Marcus had secretly paid. He confessed. Marcus had wanted me gone long enough to complete the financial transfers without interference. He had never expected me to refuse the documents. He certainly hadn't expected me to survive. When Celeste learned everything, she came to my workshop. She didn't bring cameras. She didn't bring lawyers. She came alone. I was wrong, she said. I kept working. About what? About you. I stopped. She stood there with tears in her eyes. I thought you were holding me back. I waited. I thought you were afraid of my success. She swallowed. But you were the only person who never wanted anything from it. I looked at her. That's not entirely true. She looked confused. I wanted one thing. What? You. Her eyes filled with tears. And I thought that was enough. I nodded. It was enough for me, too. She stepped closer. Then let me fix it. I shook my head. You can't fix 7 years by apologizing. I know. Do you? She nodded. I know. I looked at her for a long moment. I don't hate you. She began to cry. But I don't know how to be your husband anymore. That sentence broke something in her. She covered her face. I didn't move toward her. Not because I was cruel. Because sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is refuse to give them false hope. She left quietly. For the first time, I understood that closure wasn't always a reunion. Sometimes closure was simply knowing the truth and choosing what to do with it. And I thought that was the end. I was wrong. Because 2 months later, Cleartone received an offer that could turn our small company into a global business. The offer came from a technology group in Europe, and their lead negotiator was someone I had never met. Someone who would soon become very important to me. Her name was Sophia Loren, and unlike everyone from my old life, she had no idea who Celeste Arden was. She only knew me as Daniel Vale. That was exactly how I wanted it. Sophia Loren's first question had nothing to do with Celeste. It was about the prototype. She stood across from me in our small conference room, holding a printed technical report. You designed the original frequency separation system yourself? Yes. And you rebuilt it after the first version failed? Several times. She looked at Maya. How many? Maya smiled. 43. Sophia looked back at me. 43. 44 if you count the one we threw away before testing. She laughed. It was an ordinary laugh. That mattered more than I expected. She wasn't impressed because I had been married to a famous actress. She wasn't intimidated by my history. She didn't even know it. To her, I was simply the stubborn engineer who refused to accept a bad design. Over the next 6 months, Sophia's company helped us expand Cleartone internationally. Our little workshop became a proper research facility. We hired more engineers. We developed smaller devices. Hospitals began testing the technology. Then schools. Then emergency response teams. The most meaningful moment came when a teacher sent us a video of a child using Cleartone during a noisy classroom exercise. The child looked up and said, "I can hear the teacher." I watched that clip 3 times. Maya sat beside me. "You're crying." "No, you are." I wiped my face. "Dust." She laughed. "There is no dust in here." I smiled. For the first time, my work felt larger than my own pain. That was when I realized something important. I hadn't built Cleartone to prove Celeste wrong. I had built it because I had once dreamed of making sound clearer. My old life had delayed the dream. It hadn't killed it. Sophia and I began spending more time together. At first, it was work, then coffee, then long conversations after meetings. She learned about my childhood. I learned about hers. She had grown up in a family of musicians, but couldn't carry a tune. I was the only person in my family who could make a violin sound offended, she told me. I laughed. "You should demonstrate." "Absolutely not." She smiled. There was no pressure between us. No games. No expectation. One evening, we were walking through the city after dinner when she asked, "Why did you leave your marriage?" I stopped. I was married to someone who needed me when she was struggling. Sophia waited. When she became successful, she stopped needing me. That sounds painful. It was. She looked at me. "Did she betray you?" "Yes." "Do you still love her?" I thought about it. "I care about her." That wasn't my question. I smiled faintly. Maybe once, I thought love meant holding on no matter what. And now I think love also means knowing when to let go. Sophia nodded. She didn't tell me what I should do. She didn't promise to heal me. She simply took my hand. I looked down. Her fingers were warm. And for the first time, holding someone's hand didn't feel like an obligation. It felt like a choice. Meanwhile, Celeste's world had changed. Without Marcus, her company had to restructure. She returned millions in improperly obtained funds. Several business partners left. Her reputation suffered, but she didn't collapse. Instead, she began rebuilding honestly. She fired the executives who had protected Marcus. She hired independent auditors. She stopped allowing people to make decisions in her name. And she started therapy. I learned this from a newspaper article. For once, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt relief. Maybe she was finally becoming the woman I had believed she could be. But then she called. Daniel. I recognized her voice immediately. Celeste. I heard you're getting married. I froze. Sophia and I are engaged. There was silence. Then I heard her thought. So he really chose someone else. I hope you're happy, she said. I am. I wanted to tell you something. What? The night of the crash. Her voice broke. I wasn't telling the truth when I said I didn't remember the conversation before it. I sat down. What conversation? I was arguing with Marcus. I waited. He told me I needed to leave you. He said if I didn't, he'd expose financial information that would destroy my company. My jaw tightened. What did you say? I told him I wouldn't. I stared at the wall. Then why did you ask me to leave? She began crying. Because I was afraid. That answer hurt in a different way. She continued. I thought if I pushed you away, Marcus would stop targeting you. I closed my eyes. You never told me. I thought I was protecting you. You made me believe you didn't want me. I know. And when I asked about the divorce, you let me believe it. I was ashamed. We were silent. Then she said the words I had waited years to hear. I should have trusted you. I swallowed. Yes. She cried quietly. I'm sorry. I didn't tell her everything was okay. Because it wasn't. But I told her something I finally believed. I forgive you. She whispered, thank you. Then I added, but forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. I know. And it doesn't change where my life is now. I know. She hung up. I sat there for several minutes. Sophia found me later. She didn't ask what happened. She simply sat beside me. I rested my head against her shoulder. She whispered, you don't have to carry the past just because it once mattered. I closed my eyes. For the first time, I believed that too. Our wedding was small. There were no celebrities, no magazine covers, no red carpets, just family, close friends, Arthur, Maya, and a few people from the Clear Tone team. Sophia walked toward me beneath a simple arch covered with white flowers. I thought about the first time I had married Celeste. There had been hundreds of guests, cameras, industry executives, people who barely knew us. This time, there were fewer than 50 people, and somehow it felt bigger, because every person standing there actually knew us. When Sophia reached me, she smiled. Nervous? Yes. Good. What? Means you're taking it seriously. I laughed. During our vows, I didn't promise to rescue her. I didn't promise to sacrifice everything. I promised to build a life with her. A life where both of us could remain whole. After the ceremony, Arthur approached me. You look happy. I am. He nodded. Then stop looking over your shoulder. I smiled. I'll try. But the past wasn't finished with me yet. 3 months after the wedding, Celeste appeared at our company's headquarters. She didn't ask to see me privately. She came for a different reason. Her foundation had partnered with several hospitals to provide hearing technology to low-income patients. She wanted clear tone equipment for the program. Sophia was in the meeting. So was Maya. Celeste entered quietly. She looked different, less polished, more human. She shook my hand. Congratulations. Thank you. She turned towards Sophia. You must be Sophia. Yes. Celeste smiled. Thank you for loving him. Sophia glanced at me, then back at Celeste. He makes it easy. Celeste's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. I know. The business meeting went smoothly. Celeste didn't ask me to come back. She didn't mention our marriage. She didn't try to reopen the past. That was the first time I felt genuinely proud of her. Afterward, She stopped me in the hallway. Can I tell you something? Of course. I used to think losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I waited. Now I think losing you is the consequence of not knowing how to value you. I said nothing. She smiled sadly. And meeting you again taught me something. What? That people can love each other and still become wrong for each other. I nodded. That took me a long time to understand. She looked at my wedding ring. I won't interfere with your life. Thank you. She turned to leave. Then she stopped. Daniel? Yes. Are you really happy? I smiled. Yes. Her eyes softened. Then I'm glad. She walked away. I watched her disappear around the corner. There was no dramatic embrace. No tears falling into each other's arms. No impossible promise that we could somehow become who we had been. Just two people who had once loved each other, finally accepting that love alone couldn't undo the choices we had made. That night, Sophia and I drove home. She rested her hand on my arm. You okay? Yes. Really? I thought about Celeste. The hospital. The crash. The betrayal. The tiny room above Arthur's shop. The first clear-tone prototype. The wedding. Everything that had happened since that terrible night. I think I'm finally free. Sophia smiled. Then where are we going? I looked at the road ahead. Home. She laughed. And for the first time, the word didn't remind me of a mansion, a marriage, or a life I had lost. Home was no longer somewhere I had to earn my place in. It was the person beside me, the work waiting for me tomorrow, the people who trusted me, the future I had built with my own hands. And somewhere behind us, the past was finally becoming quiet. But one final consequence remained. The company that had once tried to erase me was about to make a decision that would change everything. And this time, I wasn't going to be the man standing behind someone else. I was going to be the man whose name stood on the door. The decision came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Our board wanted to take Clear Tone public. When Maya told me, I thought she was joking. You're serious? She slid the report across the table. The investors want an international expansion. Hospitals, schools, transportation systems. They think the technology is ready. I stared at the numbers. 5 years earlier, I had been sleeping above a music shop with a broken radiator. Now analysts were discussing my company on financial television. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt nervous. What if we grow too fast? Maya smiled. Then we make mistakes faster. That isn't reassuring. It wasn't supposed to be. We laughed. The public offering became the biggest professional challenge of my life. Every decision mattered. Hiring, manufacturing, patents, international licensing. We refused several aggressive investors because they wanted to compromise the accessibility program. I remember being told that profit was the only thing that mattered. I refused to believe it. Clear Tone had started because I wanted ordinary people to hear more clearly. I wasn't going to let success erase that purpose. Then something unexpected happened. Celeste Foundation became one of our largest nonprofit partners. She didn't ask for publicity. She actually requested that her name be removed from the campaign materials. Her foundation would fund devices. Our company would provide the technology. Nothing more. One afternoon, she visited a children's hospital where the program had launched. A little girl named Nina tested Clear Tone for the first time. She looked at her mother. I can't hear you. Her mother began crying. Celeste cried too. I heard her thought. Daniel would have loved seeing this. I was standing several feet away. She didn't know I was there. I didn't interrupt. That moment belonged to her. Later, she found me outside. You saw. Yes. She smiled. I finally understand why you cared so much about this. I nodded. You always cared about people hearing you, she said. Maybe. No, she replied. You cared about people being heard. That sentence stayed with me. Because she was right. For years, I had felt invisible. Maybe that pain had become part of the reason I built something that gave other people a voice. Celeste looked at me. I used to think being loved meant being seen. I waited. Now I think being loved means being understood. She smiled. I hope Sophia understands you. She does. Good. Then she walked away. The IPO succeeded 6 months later. The company valuation exceeded anything I had imagined. Journalists called me a visionary. Investors called me brilliant. Business schools invited me to speak. But the greatest moment wasn't the money. It happened at our headquarters after the first major expansion. Arthur walked into the lobby. He looked around at the glass walls and engineers rushing between offices. Then he looked at me. "So this is what happened upstairs." I laughed. "You remember that room?" "I remember the terrible speaker. You still complain about it." "It deserved complaints." I hugged him. He patted my shoulder. "I knew you'd make something of yourself." I smiled. I already was someone. He looked at me, then nodded. "Good answer." That evening, I went home to Sophia. She was sitting on the balcony with 2 cups of tea. She looked at me. "Big day." "Very. Did you become unbearable?" "Possibly." She handed me the cup. "I'll keep you humble." I laughed. Then she rested her head against me. "I have news." "What?" She smiled. "We're going to have a baby." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The world seemed to stop. "You're serious?" She nodded. I laughed. Then I cried. She wiped my cheek. "You're crying." "I'm allowed." "Of course." I held her carefully, and suddenly, the future felt more important than anything in the past. Not because I had forgotten what happened, because I no longer needed the past to define what happened next. The pregnancy changed our lives. Sophia continued working, but we slowed down. I started leaving the office earlier. I learned how to cook 3 meals. Only one was edible. Maya called it a technological disaster. Arthur claimed my child would inherit better survival instincts from Sophia. Our daughter, Clara, was born on a rainy morning. The moment I held her, something inside me shifted. She was tiny, angry, perfect. I looked at Sophia. We made a person. Sophia laughed through tears. Apparently, I thought about the man I had been after the crash. Angry, lost, convinced that being abandoned meant I wasn't enough. Now I was holding a child who knew nothing about fame, money, betrayal, or success. She only knew warmth. I promised myself she would grow up knowing that love was never something she had to earn by becoming useful. Years passed. Clear Tone expanded. Our company became one of the leaders in accessibility technology. Sophia and I remained private. We had another child, a son named Julian. Our home was noisy, messy, full of toys and unfinished drawings. It was everything I had once thought I had lost. Then one winter evening, I received a letter from Celeste. She was retiring from acting, not because her career had failed, because she wanted something different. She had spent years rebuilding her company and expanding her foundation. Her final project was a documentary about accessibility and the people who had benefited from the technology. She asked whether I would allow Clear Tone to participate. I agreed. During filming, we met again. She was older. So was I. The cameras weren't running when we spoke. "I heard you named your daughter Clara." "Yes." "Beautiful name." "Thank you." She smiled. Then she looked at me. "Do you ever regret leaving?" I considered the question. "No." She nodded. "That doesn't hurt as much as it used to." I smiled. "You wanted honesty." "I did." She looked toward the window. "I regret what I did." "I know. I regret not trusting you." "I know. And sometimes I miss the man who used to wait for me." I said nothing. She smiled sadly. "But I don't want him back." I looked at her. "Why?" "Because that man gave too much of himself away." Her eyes met mine. "You deserve to be who you became." I felt something loosen inside me. For years, part of me had believed I needed Celeste to admit I had been valuable. Now I realized I didn't. But hearing it from her still mattered. Not as validation, as closure. She stood. "Take care of your family, Daniel." "I will." "And yourself." I smiled. "I am." She left. I watched her walk down the hallway. No anger. No longing. Only gratitude for what had been good and acceptance of what had ended. That night, I returned home. Clara ran toward me. "Daddy." Julian followed, holding a broken toy. "Fix it." Sophia laughed from the kitchen. "You're needed." I picked up the toy. "I've been promoted." "To what?" "Chief Repair Officer." Clara giggled. I looked around her house. The photographs. The children's drawings. Sophia cooking. The sound of laughter. This was the life I had once been afraid I would never have. Not glamorous. Not perfect. Real. And I finally understood the greatest difference between my old life and my new one. Before, I'd been terrified of losing someone. Now, I was grateful for everyone I had. There was still one unfinished piece of the past. Marcus's legal case had reached its final stage. He had pleaded guilty to financial fraud and conspiracy. The contractor responsible for the brake sabotage had also been convicted. No dramatic revenge had been necessary. The truth had done enough. One morning, I received a final message from the investigator. The case was officially closed. I read it once, then deleted it. Sophia noticed. What was it? The past. She smiled. Deleted. Deleted. She kissed my cheek. Good. I looked outside. Snow was falling. For a moment, I remembered the hospital. The broken glass. Celeste's hand. The thoughts I wasn't supposed to hear. The sentence that had changed everything. If he dies, I can finally tell everyone the truth. Back then, I thought surviving the crash was the important part. It wasn't. Surviving was only the beginning. The real miracle was learning that I didn't have to spend the rest of my life trying to be loved by the person who had hurt me. I could build something else. Something honest. Something mine. And I had. Still, I didn't know that one final meeting with Celeste was waiting for me. One that would force me to confront the last question I had never answered. Could I truly forgive the woman who had once been my entire world? I thought I knew the answer. But when I saw her again, I realized forgiveness was more complicated than forgetting. The final meeting happened 7 years after the crash. By then, Cleartone had become an international company, but I still kept the old notebook from my first prototype in my desk. The pages were stained. The corners were bent. Some calculations were crossed out so many times that the paper was almost torn. I kept it because success had a way of making people forget how uncertain the beginning had been. One afternoon, Celeste called. I need to see you. Her voice was calm. What happened? Nothing bad. I waited. I just want to say goodbye properly. I understood immediately. She was leaving the country. Her foundation had established a permanent accessibility center overseas, and she planned to spend the next few years there. We agreed to meet at the small theater where we had first met. It looked smaller than I remembered. The seats were old. The stage needed repainting. But standing there brought back everything. Celeste sat in the front row. I took the seat beside her. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she laughed softly. Do you remember our first performance? You forgot half your lines. I did not. You absolutely did. I was nervous. You were terrible. She smiled. I married a cruel man. I laughed. For a moment, it felt like the old days. Then the silence returned. Celeste looked at the stage. I used to think our story ended because you left. I waited. But that's not true. She turned toward me. It ended long before that. I nodded. When I stopped listening to you. I didn't correct her. She continued. I became so afraid of losing my career that I started protecting everything except the person who had helped me build it. Her eyes filled with tears. I hurt you because I was afraid. I know. I betrayed you because I was weak. I know. And I convinced myself that pushing you away was protecting you. I looked at her. That was the part that hurt most. I know. We sat quietly. Then she asked, do you forgive me? I looked toward the empty stage. I forgave you a long time ago. She smiled. But forgiveness doesn't mean I pretend it never happened. She nodded. I wouldn't want that. I remember the good things too. She looked at me. That makes me happy. You should remember them. Why? Because not everything we had was a mistake. She began crying. I didn't reach for her. Not because I didn't care. Because we had both learned where the boundary was. Our marriage had ended. But the years weren't meaningless. They had given me memories. They had taught me love. They had taught me loss. And eventually, they had taught me myself. Celeste wiped her eyes. Is Sophia happy? Yes. Are you? I smiled. Very. She nodded. Then I have nothing else to ask. I stood. She remained seated. Daniel? Yes. Thank you for surviving. I froze. Those words took me back to the wrecked car. The sirens. The broken glass. Her terrified face, and the thought I had heard. For years, that sentence had haunted me. Now it didn't. I smiled. Thank you for letting me go. She looked down. Then we hugged. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't the beginning of anything. It was simply two people saying goodbye to a life that had once mattered. When I walked outside, Sophia was waiting across the street. She had brought Clara and Julian. Clara ran toward me. "Daddy!" I picked her up. Julian grabbed my hand. Sophia smiled. "How was it?" "Peaceful." She kissed my cheek. "Then let's go home." I looked at my family. Home. That word no longer carried any ghosts. It meant this: the people who chose me, the people I chose, the life we built together. Years later, people still occasionally asked me about Celeste. Some asked because they remembered our marriage. Some because they had read about the crash. Others wanted to know whether the famous actress and the engineer had ever reconciled. My answer was always the same. We made peace. Nothing more. Because the truth was more complicated than a headline. Celeste eventually became known less for her acting and more for her foundation. She helped fund accessibility programs across dozens of cities. She never remarried. I never asked why. It didn't matter. We had both built separate lives. And perhaps that was the healthiest ending we could have given each other. Marcus served his sentence. The contractor who sabotaged the car was convicted. The financial fraud was exposed. No one was destroyed by revenge. The people responsible simply faced the consequences of what they had done. As for me, Clear Tone continued growing. But I refused to let the company consume my life. Every Friday evening, I left the office early. Every Saturday morning, I took my children to breakfast. Sometimes Clara would ask me to explain how speakers worked. Sometimes Julian would dismantle something and insist he was improving it. Sophia would look at the mess and say, "Your children inherited your worst qualities." I would answer, "Only the best ones." And she would laugh. Our life wasn't perfect. We argued. We got tired. We made mistakes. But nobody had to disappear for the other person to shine. That was the difference. One evening, years after the final meeting with Celeste, I found my old notebook while cleaning my office. I opened it to the first page. There was that sentence again. "Someday, I want to build something people remember hearing." I smiled. I had done it. But I had also built something I hadn't known how to imagine back then. A family. A peaceful home. A life that didn't depend on someone else's approval. I closed the notebook. Then I heard Clara calling from downstairs. "Dad, dinner, coming." I walked toward the door. Then I stopped. For a strange second, I remembered the ability I had developed after the crash. For months, I had been terrified of hearing what people truly thought. But eventually, I understood something. Everyone carries thoughts they don't know how to say. People are afraid. People are insecure. People lie. People love. People regret. Sometimes they hurt the person they love most because they are too frightened to face themselves. Knowing what people think doesn't make you wise. Learning to judge people by what they consistently choose to do does. Celeste had once said she loved me. She probably had. But love without trust had not been enough. Sophia rarely made grand promises. She simply showed up. Again, and again, and again. That was love too. Maybe a better kind. I went downstairs. Sophia was setting plates on the table. Clara was arguing with Julian about who had stolen the last piece of bread. I laughed. "What's happening?" "They're fighting," Sophia said. "I can hear that." She looked at me. "Then do something." I raised both hands. "I'm an engineer, not a diplomat." Everyone laughed. I sat down, and for a moment, I looked at the people around the table. Nobody there cared about my awards. Nobody cared about my company's valuation. Nobody cared that I had once been married to a celebrity. They cared that I was there. That was enough. I had spent years believing my greatest victory would be making the people who hurt me regret losing me. I was wrong. The greatest victory was much quieter. It was waking up without checking whether someone was still choosing me. It was building something meaningful without needing applause. It was loving people who didn't require me to become smaller so they could feel bigger. It was forgiving without reopening the door. It was remembering without returning. And most of all, it was realizing that the man who walked away from that hospital wasn't a broken version of me. He was the first version of me who finally understood his own worth. The crash took many things from my life. My marriage, my trust, my certainty, but gave me one strange gift. It forced me to hear the truth. And eventually, I learned the most important truth wasn't what everyone else was thinking. It was what I was finally willing to tell myself. I was enough. I had always been enough. I just needed to stop waiting for someone else to say it. And that was how my story ended. Not with revenge. Not with the woman who left me begging to come back. Not with her life destroyed. It ended with me, sitting at a dinner table filled with people I loved, listening to ordinary laughter, and realizing that I no longer wanted anything from the past. I had already found my future, and this time I wasn't walking away from it. I was finally home,